Hey, so it's been a while since my last video. Sorry about that. But also, oh my god, the attention that Mob Psycho got, that is crazy. I'm so grateful for that. That's awesome. The last couple months have been really busy for me, and because of that and other stuff, I just kind of didn't have the motivation to be making anything or writing anything. But I can talk about that later, so let's get into the video. I love anti-heroes. I just love the concept of the anti-hero. There is something so deeply engaging yet challenging to an audience when they are presented with something that strays from the status quo. And this encourages an audience's investment in that character. Anti-heroes are all over storytelling, but how exactly do we write one while maintaining both the storytelling balancing act and, most importantly, how do we make such a potentially immoral character likable? Well, to start off, one should understand what an anti-hero is. The difference between a hero, protagonist, and anti-hero are important to understand when writing one. So let's quickly break each down before we get into the... A protagonist is a character that leads the story. However, they lack the power or heroic actions that could make them a hero. Often they are an opportunity for a character to be fleshed out and complex, with a human quality to their life. A good example would be Shinji from the Evangelion series. Despite Shinji's ability to control a brutal mech, or whatever that thing is, he is in no way powerful on his own. And he's not in any way heroic either. He is constantly confused and insecure about his own personal problems, along with having multiple less than heroic actions, which could even be considered morally wrong. Oh no! Anyway, his character is written as more human rather than heroic. The writer's priorities are showing him as a person, not as a powerful or determined person that has good actions. However, despite how immoral he can be, he is prevented from being something like an anti-hero due to his generally passive nature. This is not to say he needs to be aggressive to become an anti-hero, but rather that an anti-hero must take action towards something that is against traditional heroic beliefs. He doesn't heroically move forward for his goal like a hero, but that doesn't make him an anti-hero. A hero can have those human qualities, but with a hero, those qualities are not prioritized before their ability to be heroic. A good way to define a hero is with the classic hero's journey, which is a circle of trials that leads them through their story. There's many videos on that, so I won't get into it, but the hero's journey has been used to define heroes since, like, the Epic of Gilgamesh, so basically, it works. However, the hero's journey isn't the only way that a hero can be separated from just the average protagonist. The strength or determination that the hero character possesses makes them just slightly out of human normality. This means showing them in their story as the strong, determined adventurer who we root for, while a protagonist is more someone who, although we root for them, is flawed and still tied down to human limitations and normality. Quite simply, not all protagonists are heroes or anti-heroes. Speaking of anti-heroes...
I really I got some bad ideas in my head,
If it was me dying on the sidewalk, you'd walk right over me.
I was there. And I watched her die.
The anti-hero is what happens when this heroic character we root for has less than morally good actions. They may have ultimately good intentions, and often to make them more likable, they are written with a heroic goal. For example, saving a cat, or providing their family with money for when they die. But this goal, whatever it is, will very commonly be executed with a sort of Machiavellian ideology. In other words, they will commit unethical actions to meet their heroic goal, such as cutting down the endangered tree to save the cat, or becoming a powerful drug lord drunk with power. They are ill-fit for heroic action, but still follow a hero's journey to achieve their goal through trials and challenges. They just happen to have more morally dubious qualities and methods. This intrigues us into somewhat rooting for them, as we see the story from their perspective. We see a morally complex perspective, and that makes us feel more connected with characters like Guts, Travis Bickle, and V, rather than someone like Captain America. And yet, at the same time, we are often questioning our thoughts on rooting for them. So why do we like such deeply flawed characters? Characters that unashamedly balance between good and evil, or occasionally jump from one to the other? There's a lot of factors. Because what keeps the audience enticed with an antihero is the suggestion that there is so much more to them than simply a bad person. So much more to them than simply a good person. In fact, there is often a complete rejection of being good or bad, a philosophical diversion of traditional morality, which makes us curious to know as to where they will go with their actions. Another reason is because, quite simply, they are human. A human has no plot-driven role to win or lose, to be a hero or a villain, so there's a lot of time and room to build a real person instead of a one-dimensional, heroic protagonist. Yet still without the limits of being just some ordinary person, for example, Guts from Berserk. Because of the character Guts is, he doesn't fit a stereotypical hero's definition, but this opens up mystery and possibility. He doesn't always win, he does commit atrocities, he loses and suffers because he is a person, not a hero. The plot is flexible with antiheroes, which is the most powerful aspect of writing an antihero character. A character like Guts may develop in a more morally positive way as the story goes on, while someone like Walter White can morally spiral until he is arguably evil. They may die, they may live, they may be written as likable or hateable, but this possibility of grey actions and consequences leads to a problem when writing an antihero. With so much room in this sandbox for variety and unique characters, how do I avoid them becoming unlikable, to the point of disinterest from the audience? After all, somebody who is simply doing bad things isn't going to be engaging or relatable unless there is more to them than just an end goal. The solution to this is something I've noticed that I'll call anchors. Anchors are something we can empathize with about them. A lot of antiheroes are given an anchor of morality, comedy, or mundane human qualities, which allows the audience to empathize with them. It's not exactly saving a cat to prove the hero part, it's more like stopping to pet the dog on the sidewalk to get a more human aspect of the character. There are many ways to show anchors, and many different kinds of anchors with different kinds of characters. However, I've found that most antiheroes fall into one of three. Now, one of the more iconic antiheroes in hero stories is Marvel's Deadpool. Despite the fact that he often kills the worst of the evils in his stories, he is still undeniably willing to blast innocent people to bits along the way, or maybe even torment some for the fun of it. And yet the audience enjoys him and roots for him because of his charisma and humor. Also, I think he has a dog in the new movie. I don't know, I haven't watched the new movie, but that's pretty likable. So, charisma and humor is Deadpool's anchor. His charm and appeal gives us something to attach to him, something that makes his actions more lighthearted. Another thing is that he's pretty much just cool and has the confidence that some people would kill for, along with never really breaking that rule of don't kill animals or kids, which makes him pretty likable. This is in stark contrast to someone like Guts, who is an antihero that many argue over the morality of. He has killed innocent people and children, and he has little sympathy for the weak, and has done some things that I can't even mention in this video. Yet despite this, we root for Guts. And that is because, quite simply, there are no other options. He is literally the best this world has. This is the second type of anchor, which isn't really much of a likable personality thing and is more of a the situation kind of needs you to be the best person in the room right now thing. Of all the powerful beings in the Berserk universe, Guts is the better of many, many evils. And more importantly, we as the viewer see his reasons for his actions, making him seem more selfless and justified, despite the fact that neither are entirely true, at least for the start of his arc. His morality doesn't matter at this point. All that matters in this story is that he's the only powerful being who's not consumed by greed or bloodlust. Again, importantly, he is the only powerful being that is not consumed by greed or bloodlust in the beginning of the story. Characters are like little babies. You get attached to the main character if they come across as good in season 1, and you will be attached to them for the rest of the show as they slowly get worse. Guts kind of goes through a bunch of ups and downs, but despite that we still care about him, even though the world kind of exposes us to new goods and new evils. Because we're attached to him, it's important to establish this character as something solid in the beginning, which is why the Golden Age arc exists. And then there is the third anchor. To be honest, I couldn't really decide between who of these two to write for, but I think they're both worth mentioning. The similarity between both of these characters is that we like them because they're a sort of underdog character. The Joker has made many varied appearances, some better than others, but if we are focusing on the film Joker with Joaquin Phoenix, he is more than just a villain. He is an anti-hero with a slow descent into madness, which is much like how Travis Bickle descends into violence and strange compulsions. But what makes this madness so engaging is that the mundane, unhappy lives these characters live is something very relatable. The stuckness, the feeling of utter powerlessness, the loneliness, the lack of magic. It makes us see them as a kind of underdog in this realistic world that we can see our own problems in. These anti-heroes portray a relatable situation, and the even more relatable fantasies people have of escaping said situation. For example, a poor man who is constantly failed by the system he lives in fantasizes about being in full power of his life, stepping on the people in control of him, and letting the world shake in fear of his name. Or, in Travis Bickle's case, somebody who feels disconnected and isolated from both his world and his own identity desires to become a hero, cleaning the streets of what he believes is evil. And we see all of this from their own underdog perspectives, which in their minds paints themselves as a hero, even if it's completely delusional. Occasionally, anti-heroes can incorporate more than one of these anchors. A great example is V from V for Vendetta, who both has a romantic charm and a gentlemanliness, while also being better than the evil he plans to destroy. He may be a torturer, arsonist, murderer, and manipulator, but hey, he's anti-fascist and likes poetry, so that's pretty good. And occasionally we can see characters go from having an anchor to losing it, slipping entirely into villainy. In Breaking Bad, Walter White starts off as an underdog family man with, like most anti-heroes, a motivation we can empathize with to some degree. But as the series progresses, he slowly develops into someone so selfish that the very motivations he had at the start of the series have become something much more sinister. To the point where even the audience cannot fully understand whether to root for him or not in some cases. So if I had to conclude, I would say that the beauty of the anti-hero is its ability to disgust, amaze, and utterly manipulate the audience. Sometimes to the point where entire Reddit forums will argue for hours on end about whether a character had morally good or bad actions. And in my opinion, writing characters such as anti-heroes brings us closer to understanding ourselves as complex people. And me personally, I am really enjoying the new wave of them that has been happening over the past 10 years or so. Sorry I have been so inactive on this channel. My final year of school is coming to an end though, so you can be expecting some new slop in the future. If you like these kinds of videos, please consider subscribing to my channel or checking out my Instagram in the description to see my other projects. Thank you for watching.